versus movie. Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Movie versus Movie. It's your host, Nick, and your other host,
Patrick. What is up?
Patrick. It's the day after Halloween. How was your movie watching experience? How was your Halloween experience?
Halloween was good. A very warm Halloween up here in Boston.
Yeah, that kind of freaked me
so.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, the spookiest thing of all.
Yes, global warming, the scariest thing of all.
Yeah.
We were out at 5:30 to wait for kids, because usually kids come a little bit earlier, the littler ones, and so we wanted to be out there waiting with candy and everything. But we didn't really get anyone until 6:30, 7 o'clock. I think it's because it was so warm.
Wow, yeah, everyone's taking advantage. Yeah, we had a smoke machine. Past guest Jamie Weiner brought her smoke machine over.
I'm glad that it's getting more use.
Yeah, it comes out around this time of year, but
yeah,
that was a hit with the kids.
Nice.
Yeah.
Did you scare any of them, or was it just a pure trick or treat experience?
I think some of them are alarmed by it. We have a little neighbor. There's a couple kids next door, and they have a young girl who's maybe 2 years old. Mm-hmm. She was dressed up as the very hungry caterpillar, which was very
that's a great
adorable. One. But she was. I don't think she was a fan of the fog.
We got a Kiki from Kiki's Delivery Service, full costume, everything, probably 6 years old. And we were like, "Oh, where's Gigi?" And then she looked into her little bag and then went, "Mom, Dad, Gigi's gone."
Oh no! Mirroring the movie.
I guess Gigi's with his family, but the dad ran away to find Gigi because they thought they left the cat at home, and apparently. Because we saw him come back a half hour later, he couldn't find it. He was like, "Has anyone seen a stuffed black cat?"
Oh no, Dad!
I know.
I'm in trouble. That's the kind of thing where you're like, "Is your parent making you do this to be a cool parent?"
Right.
But no, that's fun. We had a metal dad, guy with full sleeve tattoos, neck and face tattoos, wearing a bunch of piercings, wearing a Megadeth shirt with a little also 6-year-old girl dressed as Ariel.
Oh, very cute.
Respect the metal dad.
Absolutely. So you watched My Cousin Vinny on Halloween, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I don't know if I'd classify it as a Halloween movie, although in terms of, fits, it's very inspiring for fashion sense and potentially Halloween costumes.
Absolutely. Alice and I were like, why don't we go as these two for next Halloween?
Yeah. Whoever goes as Mona Lisa, though, just has to change their outfits 12 times constantly during the night.
Honestly, Mona Lisa's outfit, the jumpsuit with the open back, is so iconic. I'm like, this is the currently in fashion still. And her shoulder pads are amazing. So I guess we'll dive in then. Do you want to start with My Cousin Vinny?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was actually watching it right before this, so it's very fresh.
Yeah.
All right, My Cousin Vinny, 1992. Amazing film. We have Joe Pesci and Marissa Tomei as the main characters, Mona Lisa and Vin. Basically, My Cousin Vinny is the story of these two college kids who are transferring essentially from New York City to UCLA, and they're driving around the country, as college kids do, and they are in Alabama. They stop at the Sack of Suds convenience store and buy a laundry list of grocery items, trying to do their best to be as cheap as possible. One thing that was a little bit of culture shock for me was they were like, yeah, this can of beans or whatever is 39 cents. We should save the extra pennies to get the one for 32 cents. I was like, oh my God. That didn't feel good.
Yeah. The movie, it's fascinating because you don't really get why they were in Alabama till way later on in the movie. You just kind of jump in of these two kids, clearly from Karate Kid, one Karate Kid.
Yeah.
One's
Oh my
not
God, I
Karate
didn't even
Kid.
notice that. His little like weird shadow stash completely masked who he
Really?
was to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. But we were watching the movie, and Aaron got there like halfway through and was like, "Oh my God, it's the Karate Kid, Danny Zudo." Who?
Danny Ziti?
She's like, I think his name in Karate Kid's like Daniel LaRusso. So I guess she was close. It's kind of a Danny's Grease plus Karate Kid equals
Exactly.
Danny Zudo. But yeah, I didn't know. I had never seen this movie, and I had some cultural awareness of it, but I did not realize that it's like a fish out of water. The whole thing's just like a
Yeah.
big fish out of water gag. What if Brooklyn in Alabama?
Yeah, because I'll just get to that point where one of the kids accidentally shoplifts a can of tuna. They leave. They're pulled over by some cops, and it's revealed to the audience that the clerk at the Sack of Suds was killed in a robbery, and they think that these two kids did it. But they're like, "Oh man, let's just admit that we stole this can of tuna. It was an accident. How bad can it be?" And it sort of is like a misunderstanding for like probably 15 minutes of the movie where he's like, yeah, I did it. I whatever can move this process along. I'm so sorry. And the guy's like, well, we're gonna put you to death. And he's like, what, for a can of tuna? And then he's like, no, for shooting this guy. And then they need lawyers, so he calls his mom, who gets his cousin Vinny, who's a lawyer, to come and help them out. And that's Joe Pesci's character. But yeah, the fish out of water stuff, like, man, the first quarter of this movie is just shots of Joe Pesci and Marissa Tomei like entering into different locations, and then the camera shooting them in their like New York like leathers, and then like turning around to like whatever location they're in and showing just like the people of Alabama, I guess.
Just reaction shots and like grits. What a grits! And it's like that plus the first chunk too is a lot of just like almost like sitcom setup of just like people misunderstanding each other, not being clear, leading to like real wacky hijinks. But in this case, it's pretty potentially being convicted and sentenced to death, which is kind of looming over the whole movie. They don't they don't let you forget that they're going to get executed if they get charged.
It's wild that it's like, it's definitely played for laughs. This is a comedy, and throughout the whole movie there's just like gag after gag. Like even when Vinny comes for the first time and goes into the prison to meet his clients, these two kids, like the first thing he does is he tips the guard. Like he gives the guard $1. And then he comes in, and then like the whole thing is a gag where one of the guys thinks that he's just another prisoner that is like trying to make him his like essentially subordinate / like maybe have a like sexual relationship with him in exchange for protection in prison. And Vinny's like, what are you talking about? And like it's like a 5-minute joke of like them just misunderstanding each other. But yeah, then there's like these shots of like the lights dimming because they're electrocuting somebody, or like them going into prison and you see all the people protesting the death penalty. Like it's bleak, dude.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a kind of, we can talk more at the end about like the movie as a whole. I feel like it's trying to say a little bit of something. Even it's like pretty broad strokes of like the justice system in Alabama is a little fucked up, but like I feel like it's enough of like a seed in there to have, especially with the protest. I feel like the protests, but you don't really get, it's not like you really get, it's a pretty contained movie. You don't really get any perspective of like anyone else in the prison or anything. So.
Yeah, it really doesn't tell you like the moment that they're in. It's a very hyper localized, like it's just these characters and them kind of bumping into their surroundings. It's not like, this is a moment in which America is wrestling with the the death penalty or anything like that. Yeah, and so he gets hired on. It is revealed that this is his very first case, and it has taken him 6 years to pass the bar after law school. And that before this, he's really only done like personal injury lawsuit resolution. which I think is maybe there's one part in this movie which is maybe my favorite part, like favorite gag in the whole movie, which is Joe Pesci is in a bar and this guy is trying to fight him for $200 because like Mona Lisa won a game of pool and he wants to collect, and the guy's like, well, you can fight me for it. And so he's talking with this guy, and then there's a guy in a full neck brace that's like in a different part of the bar, and he's just like, did you get rear-ended? And he's like, no, I fell. And he's like, oh, okay. And then later he's like, did you fall on your property or someone else's? It's just like really such funny. A funny, it's so stupid.
It is though, stuff like that. There are a lot of gags in the movie that, like, it's a really, well, I don't say it's a tight screenplay because it's a little long, but it's like 2 hours long. For the type of movie, it's maybe a little long, but there are a lot of great, there's just everything kind of pays off that's introduced at the beginning. There's a lot of like great callbacks where they're kind of like trusting that you'll remember a little detail from earlier to like get the joke, like that kind of stuff. And
even like not even like joke stuff, but like big plot stuff. Like at the very beginning, him and Marissa Tomei sit down at a breakfast diner essentially, and they're getting breakfast, and it's the first time he's ever had grits, and so he's like, how like what are these, and like basically gets the rundown of like what are grits, how to make grits, all that kind of thing. And that pays off as like a major plot point in solving the case later on when he disproves somebody's testimony with that knowledge.
It pays off in the plot and as a joke too, though, because you get the like kind of the dramatic irony of like him explaining grits to the like Alabama jury, and like really chastising the guy for claiming he can cook grits in 5 minutes. And,
and he's like only had grits the one time. And also I love how he's like, and maybe this because I'm a Yankee, I actually don't know if I've ever had grits. And he at one point says, "Do you like your grits al dente? Is that a thing?" Yeah, okay.
I thought that's just him doing a bit because he's Italian and from New York, and also just him not knowing.
So he gets hired on. He goes into the sort of judge's office, I guess, and he sort of gets the sense that the judge thinks that because Vinny is from New York, he's looking down upon Alabama law, and he's like, I'm going to hold you to the highest standard, and like you better know procedure and everything else, or I'm going to call you on it. And it kind of sets up this antagonistic relationship between the judge and Vinny for the rest of the film, in which they kind of keep sparring, and the judge keeps kind of calling him on stuff like not wearing a suit because he wears like a leather jacket to court and all that kind of stuff. I thought that that part, like going back to what you're saying about what is it trying to say about law and everything, it kind of like, I didn't feel like that the movie was looking down on Alabama like justice standards or whatever, but it definitely like feels like it's looking down on like Southerners in some way, because the town is sort of a little bit run down and a little bit rural, and like it keeps setting up this sort of this dichotomy between the people from the north and the people from the south. Like, what did you think about that? Did you catch any of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not terribly egregious, but I think there's a little bit of the South being backwards, but it's not like it's not like the people from New York are portrayed as elevated like culturally or intellectually either. So I don't know if it's making like a clear value judgment, although it's like, I think it's leans a little more towards. I do feel like it kind of points to like maybe a systemic problems with the Southern justice system, and a little bit with the people, but I think it's mostly kind to the people. But I think kind of where it ends up, which we can talk to about the end too. I'll save that for the end, but I was kind of surprised I thought it was going to go a different direction in like kind of who is the villain, or kind of the lack of there's not really a real end up being a real villain in the movie. But I feel
Yeah,
like that's yeah.
yeah, we can talk about it at the end, like you said. But yeah, I totally agree that it was sort of like everyone kind of leaves with a handshake.
Yeah, they're like
Yeah.
mutual respect. But the actor who plays the judge
Hmm.
is Fred Gwynn, who played Herman Munster on the Munsters, which tracks because he looks like a monster. But I just love it's such a the casting between him and Joe Pesci is so incredible because Joe Pesci is so little and they let him be like they don't try to hide the fact that he's such a teeny guy. And
Yeah.
so I just love any scene of the two of them going up against each other.
It really is like it is sort of opposites, right? He's like a smaller guy. He's wearing leather and like a gold chain and like rings and all that stuff.
Mhm.
And the judge is like so like an intellectual, has gone to Yale, is always in a suit or his judge robes, and he's like smoking a pipe. It is sort of like they keep putting these pictures next to each other and being like, these two do not fit in the same the like profession essentially. Yeah, and then it kind of causes some problems too, because like immediately the judge throws Vinny into jail as a contempt of court for like talking back to him because he doesn't know how to do the arraignment process right, and how to plead. And it is basically the middle part of the movie, I would say, is just him screwing up like trial procedure over and over again, because he doesn't know what he's doing, because apparently you're like supposed to get through law school and then watch cases in like a court or have like a firm teach you when you get hired by a firm. I don't know, like, is that really how it happens in real life? Because that seems like a really weird kind of backwards way to do it.
I think so. Yeah, I don't think you really. I don't know that how much court actually teaches you about how to like go to trial or not court. Law school teaches you about how to go to trial. I don't know. My law school references are Legally Blonde and a Supreme Court podcast I listen to. But that's in my expert opinion. This is one of those movies though that people cite as being
What it is like to be
like accurate, and I
which
can
is
see
wild
that.
to me because it's like so strange. Like it very much feels like performative, and I guess it like lawyers are just actors and you're just trying to like convince 8 people or however many jury members you have to like be on your side.
Yeah, no, it's but I think just like the procedure aspect of it, they actually like because basically, once you kind of they get the initial exposition out of the way pretty quick, and then they show up, Vinny and Mona Lisa show up, and then from there on, it's mainly just there's hijinks, a little bit of them around the town, but it's mainly just kind of like tracking the trial. So I feel like you get a good sense of the process.
Yeah,
And like,
you really do. Like by the end, it's like, okay, these are the different steps. This is what you can and can't do in court. You realize that the judge has the power to sort of like make rules on the fly when it comes to how you act in court and things like that, which is interesting. And we can maybe talk about that later on, because the judge is, while not completely successful in like screwing up the case for him, he is like a hostile judge. You know what I mean?
yeah, and, you get to the end, and right, the judge can decide, has kind of a lot of authority to admit or not admit things into evidence or stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which I think is accurate. I mean, we just watched the documentary about the Menendez brothers case, which was kind of like eerily paralleled just with the young, at least aesthetically, the two, Ralph Macchio and the other kid in this movie, like compared to them. But that was a big thing with that, was their first trial was a mistrial, and then the second trial they wanted to get a verdict, and so they basically didn't admit a lot of the evidence about the parents abusing the brothers and stuff, and that just like totally changed the trial. Because then you're like, well, as the jury, you can't, even if you know this to be true or from testimony that you saw from the last trial, you can't like consider that in your decision.
Yeah. And I also think that because you talked about some of the hijinks, this movie does have like there's an A and a B plot and stuff, and it's actually during there's a fight that Vin and Mona Lisa have where she says essentially, you said that if you won your first case that we would get married. And he goes on a rant where he's like, I have these two kids' lives in my hands. I am trying to figure out how to be a lawyer. I have a guy looking to fight me for $200. I have this happening, and your biological clock is going thump, thump, thump. And it's basically he lists out all of the different plot lines that like the movie is tracking, because there's also the fact that he hasn't slept in 5 days, because there's a running gag where everywhere he tries to sleep for the night, there's like a weird steam whistle that happens at 5 a.m, or a train that goes by, or a crazy screaming owl, or a thunderstorm. But I feel like all of the jokes pay off, like all of the threads of this plot pay off really well.
Yeah. It ties everything up really well.
Yeah, like the fight for $200, he keeps talking his way into and out of it, where he's like, where's the money? Do you have the money? And the guy's like, oh, I can get the money. And he's like, okay, we can fight, but like get the money first. And then the guy comes the next time and he has a wad of bills. He's like, how do I know that you don't have a $20 bill wrapped around 100? 100 ones. And the guy's like, I have $200. He's like, okay, fan it out and show me. And then he's like, ugh, and like walks away because he doesn't have $200. And then finally, the last time you see him, the guy's like, here it is, $200, ready to do it. And then Joe Pesci just like jump punches him in the face and immediately knocks him out.
It's my favorite. It's like my favorite punch. It's my favorite punch in any movie I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's so silly because the whole time you're like, this guy's gonna beat Joe Pesci's ass because again, he's so small and this guy's huge. And then like Vinny just does this like jump punch, completely knocks him out in one hit and takes the $200. Amazing, perfect.
Yeah, and again, works as its own funny gag on its own. But it also. Again, I think the movie's a little long, but it's still everything like basically serves a purpose because you kind of you realize that like, wow, he's a terrible lawyer. He's kind of an idiot. He's not willing to like do the research. But then Karate Kid's like, look, I trust him. He can see through anyone's bullshit and can argue. Like no one can argue like him. And he talks about how at the birthday parties, he's always calling out the magician. He knows exactly their trick. And so then you get that, that's basically what he's doing with the big thug that wants to fight him as he's seeing through his trick. And I feel like that's kind of where the movie starts to turn a little bit, where you start to get a little bit of trust in him as like, he can make this work. Yeah.
It's kind of like that movie tries to head fake you where it sets you up to believe that Vin can't do any of these things. Like you said, it seems like he doesn't know any of the procedure or rules. He's like reading them for the first time and he doesn't know how to do anything and he's not prepared. But then when you get like the final third of the movie, it's like, oh, actually he's really good at all of this stuff. Like he did the research. He goes to all of the people's homes, all of the witnesses' homes and like talks to them and figures out how to undermine their testimony. And he does all this other stuff to help him and his clients. And he actually does care about the kids too. And so it does. I guess this movie's thesis is like, don't judge a book by its cover, because everything, even the small like B plots, are all kind of like about that too, of setting you up to believe one thing about somebody and then kind of switching them and making you believe another thing. And
then I also think, I think the other running thing is that Mona Lisa's clearly smarter than Vinny.
Yeah. And
is also doing the research the whole time. So I feel like she, that's also a part of it, is she's figuring a lot of this stuff out. And
and they're like a team. And it's also, it's fun to watch this for like a second or a third time, because Joe Pesci never actually says throughout the entire movie that he is like more right or better or understands stuff better than Mona Lisa, really. In fact, every time somebody comes up to them and says like, and tries to kind of undermine her because she's a woman, he's like, what are you talking about? She's an expert mechanic. Or like, you know how this works because your dad runs a garage. Let me explain it to you in like this way because you're awesome at this. Or, when they have a moment where they're arguing about like a faucet that's dripping and Mona Lisa wins the argument. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the movie never lets like, basically the entire time is like she's actually the one that is got her shit together in this movie.
Yeah, and he's the relationship is great because one, they're horned up by arguing. That's
Yeah.
part of it. Is arguing and makes them horny, and then he's kind of dismissive of her a few times, but never like he's more just like, I don't know. He's a little bit of a dick sometimes. I can't fully co-sign all of Vincent LaGuardia Gambini's actions. Just want to put that on the record.
I love his middle name is LaGuardia. It's so stupid. I love it. Yeah, I was just going to say that they have this section of them sort of navigating this town. It's also super funny when Mona Lisa at the beginning is like, I bet they have terrible Chinese food here, which is great. What an amazing way to say that. But also the trial starts. The prosecutor and Joe Pesci kind of meet and have a chat as lawyers, and you learn that Joe Pesci's character essentially went to a traffic court to argue a traffic ticket, and the judge there thought he did such an amazing job convincing this cop to stand down on the ticket that he was like, you should be a lawyer, and like supported him through this whole process and like helped him when he got out of his law school, and like was really proud of him. And it's sort of like a father-son, like implied that it's like, you know, very kind of a paternal relationship between them, which is really nice. And that kind of comes up at the end as well, this specific judge. But I thought it was interesting that they set that up to be like, judges don't have to be like all about status and all about like, where did you go to law school? Have you done this before? Like there are also people who are, you know, more, I guess, for the people. I don't know how you say that, but like are judging you based on your ability, I guess, rather than anything else.
Yeah, there's some humanity there, and yeah, it is a very like sweet, you know, anecdote backstory that he tells, and it kind of serves as like a nice sweet thing, and then again it does pay out. It just feels like a screenplay that was like written with, you know, there are all sorts of books and stuff about like how to write a screenplay. It just feels like it's very much like everything that's set up needs to pay off in some way.
Yes, everything that's in is like there for a reason, kind of thing.
Yeah, which I think it. We can talk about it with the other movie. I think it contrasts the other movie a little bit. Maybe I need a closer watch, but there was just less. I think Moonstruck had more moments where I was scratching my head.
I can't wait to talk about Moonstruck. Honestly, what a dark horse of a movie.
But not, and that's not disparaging against Moonstruck. I think it works in this weird abstract way. But this movie does just feel like everything pays off. But I'm sure it's it did feel like a movie where I was like, I could just put this on again and watch it. It's a very comforting. I understand I understand.
Wait, Moonstruck or My Cousin Vinny?
My Cousin Vinny.
Yeah.
Like your feeling of it being a Thanksgiving movie in the sense that it's just like it's cozy and it's nice to spend time with these people. But it's not there's nothing Thanksgiving about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Aesthetically,
Yeah, it doesn't have any like specific holiday stuff. It just feels sort of like a little bit family oriented, and then like you said, it's just a joy to spend time with these characters.
Yeah.
Apparently, I was looking up after I watched the movie. Apparently, they had tried to do a sequel, but Marissa Tomei didn't sign on for it, and so they kind of shelved it after a while. Of him, he was going to be practicing law in England, which would have been, I think, a very silly place to put him.
The things we could have, oh my God, the gags we could have had.
Him in a wig, I am sure would have happened.
Him in a wig, something with like bangers and mash, probably.
Yeah, exactly.
I was thinking, I was like, where's the prequel? If it was made now, they'd be doing a Vinny in law school prequel where we get the whole, you know, because you
like
could still do a fish out of water
thing.
Yeah, you can still do a fish out of water there, but then you'd have to get, you know, they use either find an actor or do some Disney de-aging to age down. They should do an Irishman style My Cousin Vinny prequel now with like 87-year-old Joe Pesci.
Did you know that he basically he doesn't do as much acting anymore, but he has consistently put out studio like crooner albums of
Okay.
him.
I've learned, I didn't know he's still doing it, but I learned this because in one of them he's singing as
my cousin
in
as
character.
Vinny, yeah,
Okay,
which is
did
so
you-
funny. It's like Vincent Gambino sings the hits or something like that.
I love it. Did you listen to it? I didn't listen
No.
to it. I should. All right. I'm gonna listen to it after this. Yeah, no, it's wild.
It's so funny. Because it's like Christmas albums, and then like you said, he put that out like right after he made this movie, essentially. Definitely looking to capitalize on the popularity.
Yeah, and I don't like, it makes sense that he would be like a, Sinatra style crooner given his,
General demeanor.
his oeuvre. Yeah, but I'm also like, his voice doesn't come off to me as like particularly like sonorous and like, but maybe
that's why I'm fascinated to actually like listen to it and figure out what he sounds like. It's got to be crazy. I'm very excited to listen to the Gambino sings the hits, but yeah, so they're in court. He finally comes in and he's in like, just bad thing after bad thing keeps happening to him. He's not getting any sleep. His suit that he has finally obtained gets all splattered in mud, so he has to buy sort of like a weird prom suit. And it's so good. And the judge is like, "What, are you making fun of me?" And he's like, "No, judge. In fact, nowhere in town is there a 1-hour cleaner, and my suit got muddy. And also the suit store, everyone in the suit store got the flu, and so it's closed. And so I had to go to a secondhand store and buy this ridiculous outfit because I know you don't like my leather jacket." And the guy's like, you're going to jail, contempt of court again.
Which I love that. And also you get when the car gets stuck in the mud, he gets out of the car and hits a big Home Alone style slip and fall. And I thought, in my head, this movie came out, I thought this movie came out in the 80s. So in my head, this movie came out before Home Alone. So I was like, this was his audition tape. They saw him take that fall and were like, perfect. But this came out after Home Alone was 90 and this was 92. So I think it was more of a callback.
Yeah, this is like, we know that like this is a movie for families, and we know that the kids are gonna love to see Joe Pesci eat absolute shit.
Although it's also not it's not a movie for families because there's a lot of F-bombs. Other than that, it's pretty, like, content wise, there's nothing objectionable. But I like how they were just like, no, we're going for the R just so that Joe Pesci can say, or maybe he just did, maybe that wasn't even in the script and that was just, he just said fuck so much they were like, well, we can't cut around this.
I wonder if that is the case, just because I feel like if you have Joe Pesci in a film, you can't just have him be all buttoned up. Like, he always is either the criminal or he is like the foul mouthed with the heart of gold guy.
Right. Well, in Home Alone, they just make up curse words, right?
Yeah.
Isn't he gets real mad but it's just, yeah, just make him say gibberish. They probably, I imagine they let him do like, okay, we'll do one take with the real words and then you got to do a take with the fake words.
Yeah, or like ADR it in afterwards.
You just clearly see him mouthing fuck and it's just like, drat.
Yeah, I think it's going to be it would be so great if it was like Home Alone, the original undubbed version. But yeah, so the next section of the movie is actually I think my favorite part of the movie, just because it's just like dopamine rush after dopamine rush, which is just all of the witnesses on the stand that have testified against the kids. Joe Pesci gets up and just rips their testimony apart in these like very specific and great ways. They're pretty airtight. Like, you can't really, it's just like such a satisfying as a viewer to just be like, yeah, fucking get up. Did you have like any specific one that you like the best? Because I like the grits one where he's just yelling at the guy. I think that's funny. But I really like when he has the old woman on the stand with the glasses. I think that one's probably my favorite.
Yeah, the glasses one's great. What is it? It's grits, glasses, and then the guy with the I like the guy with the trees where he's showing him the pictures and
And he's like, how many bushes? And he's like, 5. And he's like, don't forget these 2.
He's like, you explain what these big tall things are. And he's like, trees. Very fun.
I do love how he's also like, yeah, exactly, trees. Don't, if you know the answer, don't be afraid to shout.
Yeah. He's so just like, I think it kind of caught me off guard too, because obviously Joe Pesci is like, has a lot of iconic roles, but I don't think I just expected him to be like so charismatic. Like he's just like
so charismatic. Yeah. And yeah, in comparison to like Goodfellas or something, where he's the most terrifying person in the entire world.
Right. And you're like, this guy would be this guy would be a nightmare to spend any time with. Yeah. And he's like playing a similar type, but just like pitched just differently enough that it like plays as pretty wholesome, and like you're just charmed by him.
Yeah, it's like kind of like whose side are you? Whose side is the camera on, essentially? And in Goodfellas and all that, it's sort of like the camera is neutral, and so you're seeing a criminal doing bad things, and you're supposed to be like, this is a bad person. But in this one, it's like, hey, this is your cousin, your friend, and you're on his side, and like, look at him try so hard, and so you're just sort of on his side the whole way through, and it's so that I think allows you to be charmed by him a lot easier.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. But
so yeah, they do this, and then the next day, the prosecution does a surprise witness that the judge allows, even though Vinny hasn't been able to like see or hear anything from this guy before. And it's an FBI analyst who essentially testifies that the tire markings on the crime scene match the car that they were driving, and this is the part where the judge kind of does come off as like evil and sort of like, I'm using my general dislike of you, the prosecutor or the defendant lawyer, to essentially screw you over and screw the case up. I think this is like, definitely done for dramatic irony, but it does sort of undercut the judge's like entire point earlier, which is if you come to my court, the rule and the procedure comes above everything else. And he just sort of undermines that in this moment. But what do you think?
Yeah, no. I think he's, a bit of a like petty tyrant. And yeah, that comes clear. The only the thing that caught that stood out from this scene is what the expert witness guy is like a pretty I don't know, I'd say very recognizable character actor, James Rebhorn. Yeah. I feel like he's in like Independence Day and stuff. His Southern accent was rough. Of all the Southern accents in the movie, I was like, he didn't have to be a Southern character. He could have driven that. He could have.
He's FBI. He could be from anywhere, or he could just be stationed in Atlanta or whatever.
Yeah, you can tell. Well, I think this kind of gets to what I was expecting. I was expecting there to be a more nefarious turn with the local between the cops and the prosecutor and the judge, because they're all obviously close and friends, which I think is accurate to real life. And the kind of the fact that it ends up being a coincidence that an almost identical car with 2 young men were the perpetrators, rather than some other random act of violence, and them deliberately trying to pin it on these 2 just so that they have someone that they can put away and blame for it. I thought that was gonna kind of like be the turn that it takes, and so this these kind of later moves by the judge, which seem a little more like, okay, this case is starting to get out of control, I need to like rein it back in, I thought kind of spoke to that. But then in the end, it's more like, no, these are all, everyone in this scenario is legitimately in pursuit of justice and the truth.
Except for the sheriff, who really he really misquotes the two guys, because when they are in at the beginning, when they're in custody, the sheriff comes in and is like, so when did you just shoot him? And the guy's like, shoot him? I shot him? And the guy's like on the stand reading it out, being like, and he said, I shot him. Then he repeated, I shot him. And it's like, okay, you know that's not what they were saying.
Yeah. But that's kind of, I think, that's kind of, that's where I thought it was going. But I think it's the movie has a belief in the like goodness and the like altruism of the justice system, even if, excuse me, some of its practitioners are imperfect versus, kind of identifying a more corrupt system. So
yeah. And during all of this, the judge is trying to look up Joe Pesci's character's like legal history, and it keeps kind of coming back where he's like, Vincent Gambino doesn't have any history of cases, and he's like, oh well, I'm an actor and my stage name is what I practice under. Jerry Gallo, who's like a famous lawyer from back in New York, but he also recently died, and so he like calls him in again. He's like, Jerry Gallo is dead, and then he's like, wait, Jerry Gallo? No, Jerry Callow. And just like keeps delaying. Yeah.
And he's like, you better hope that this case is wrapped up by the time I hear back about Jerry Callow. Which it is. It ends up being wrapped up by the time he hears back, which I feel like we're getting to it, but we gotta talk about Marissa Tomei, I feel like.
Yes. So yeah, this is the big moment everyone loves from this movie, where like Joe Pesci is stressed out. He's like, doesn't know how to win the case anymore. He's like really, worried about the kids. He hasn't had any sleep, all that kind of thing. And then he lashes out at Mona Lisa, and Mona Lisa's like, fuck you, I'm leaving. And then Vinny looks at one of the pictures that Mona Lisa has been taking on this like pink camera throughout the whole thing, and sees something about the tires of the car, and brings Mona Lisa, like kind of drags her into the courtroom, has a sheriff bring her in, but she's so mad at him that she doesn't want to come in anyway. And then it's like the big monologue where he shows the picture and says like, what do you see here? Could it possibly have been the same car? And she's like, no, and goes on this amazing monologue showing how much of an expert she is at cars and mechanics, and completely wins the case, essentially.
Yeah. The defense is wrong.
Yeah, the defense is wrong.
It's so good too. And the way it's pitched too, because it's her, she starts as a reluctant witness. I don't know. You just get the attitude and the like command, and her being like pissed off. It's so good. I mean, she's great in the whole movie. And
Yeah.
she won. That's another commonality.
Best supporting actress.
She won the Oscars. Oops.
Yeah.
And there was apparently people were upset that felt like
really
she didn't deserve
she's
it,
amazing in this.
That's insane. I don't know what else came out that year, but like,
so yeah, she basically wins the case. The sheriff comes in and is like, hey, the defendant's lawyer asked me to pull any arrests of somebody with this other car, which Mona Lisa kind of reveals is the real killer's car. And they found a match of two young men in the same color car, but this other model in Georgia, who were arrested for owning a gun that had the same caliber bullets as the murder weapon. And so then the prosecution's like, we admit defeat. We let this go. We're throwing this out of court. And the kids are able to get away. But then the judge like pulls them in and is like, hey, I finally got word back about Jerry Callow. And I just want to say it's such an honor to work with someone of your dignified credentials or something. And he's like, what? Yeah, okay. And it's revealed that Mona Lisa, even though they were fighting, called the judge who got Vinny into the legal profession, and had him call the judge and convince him of Jerry Callow's legal weight, I guess.
Yeah. And again, yeah, just like another little nice bow wrapped up, even with them finding the gun. Like early in the movie, he's talking to the prosecutor and he's like, so how do you think the case is going? And he's like, I think it's pretty good. The only thing I want is a murder weapon. And like, you get that by the end. And yeah, I thought, I was like, oh, it's just going to be by coincidence there's a Jerry Callow in New York. But I like that they tie it back up and kind of give it that payoff. And then yeah, they literally drive into the sunset arguing with each other.
Yeah. About their wedding, which they are now going to have because he won his first case. And it's a nice, sweet little ending. Patrick, what do you think about this movie? Was this your first time watching it?
This was my first time watching it, and Nick,
hell yeah, dude.
I loved this movie. it was just such a great time watch. I don't know. I think in my head I had a reputation. I didn't know it was just a straight up comedy. Like once it started, you can get the tone pretty quickly. You're like, oh, there's a lot of jokes in here. I thought it was kind of, comedic elements, but a little more like dramatic. But again, it's like 2 hours, maybe one too many gags of like something waking them up in the night, but it moves pretty quick. Like again, you're just, I don't know. I'm charmed by our short king Joe Pesci and Marissa Tomei, and it's like, I don't know, it's pretty undeniable.
Yeah, the thing for me in this movie is that this is like my fourth or fifth time watching it. I watched it as a kid quite a bit. And the thing about it is that every single time I'm like, yeah, let me just throw this on in the background. I'll do something else while this is just like kind of going. And every single time by the ending, I'm completely locked in just watching the movie because it's like so much fun to watch. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think we've talked with other movies about trying to going back and rewatching, especially comedies from the 90s to the 2000s. You're kind of always waiting with bated breath to be like, uh-oh. And I feel like this movie has the early jail sequence is a little like, ugh. And then I think the only other scene that's rough is the public defender scene. And even that in
with
the
the
movie,
stuttering, you mean?
Yeah, the other non-karate kid is like, I'm gonna hire the public defender.
Yeah,
Vinny can't handle this, and you see the guy briefly. He seems charming and nice, and then he actually gets up to talk to the jury, and he has a like pretty debilitating stutter and can't get a sentence out, and clearly like alienates them. Which that's played for laughs, and it's a little rough to watch. I do think I did laugh when he gets back to the table and he's like, I think I did pretty good. Or something along those lines.
For me, my favorite thing for him is when he goes up to the witness and he starts asking questions, and the witness is like, yeah, I have glasses. He's like, show the glasses. Do you think you can really identify these people without your glasses? And he's like, they're reading glasses. And then he goes and sits down. He's like, ooh, he's a tough one.
Yeah. So I feel like that, like he's characterized funnily enough that the stutter thing, I think too, I saw something that the actor felt didn't like the scene because he had a stutter as a kid, and he was like, it really brought back some bad stuff, and it kind of like typecast me afterwards. And it was hard to get work. So I was like, that's tough, but also not the worst, probably not the worst thing in a movie from 1992 that we could dig up. So
yeah. So you said earlier that you wanted to talk a little bit about the ending and just sort of about the law stuff and like this movie's view of, I guess, like Southern law, or just like in general, it's like politics or anything like that. Is there anything we want to talk about before we move on to Moonstruck?
I think I kind of touched on it. Yeah, just the idea that it's like there's no malicious intent here from practitioners of the law in any real sense, other than that they're just trying to get the guys who did it versus, what I assumed the framing was going to be was that they intentionally framed these two guys who were from out of town, right, knowing that they wouldn't be able to effectively defend themselves and they could easily, wipe their hands of it and put it away. So, but, but it's a, big Hollywood movie from 1992. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like at this point too, I mean, it's like it's the 90s. The Clinton crime bill is in effect. People love cops. Like, this is just sort of its time in that way. Like, I don't think it has any very complex feelings about the court of law in the same way we might now. If this movie was made now, I think they would have probably a little bit more of that. But it also really doesn't need it. Like, it's just, like you said, it is a straight, broad comedy. Like, you just sort of sit down and there's nothing too bad that happens. Mostly the bad things that are like ratcheting up tension is just Vincent Gambino making an ass of himself in court.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, great movie. Two big thumbs up here.
Amazing. All right. Right after this, we will be back with our talk about Moonstruck.
You've lived a sinner's life. Now you've died a sinner's death.
The first heartbreak is how good it felt to be enveloped in something that didn't hurt. I don't care if it was dark, it was still mine for a moment. I'm so tired.
What goes through your mind as you float through this day after day, night after night?
I should have done more.
I've suffered worse storms than this in my bloody sleep. Give me your all, I say! Come on!
Stay with me, Lord, because I am weak, and I need your strength, that I may not fall so often.
Starting November 4th on Game Master Monday, climb aboard the worthy Mapple, sail the Stygian Sea, brave the depths of hell, and find salvation in our next Game Master Monday miniseries, Hell Whalers. Available everywhere you enjoy podcasts.
Welcome back to Movie versus Movie. We are talking about movies that feel like holiday movies, or movies that you watch around the holidays that don't involve holidays. We just talked about My Cousin Vinny and Patrick. Why don't we get into Moonstruck?
Yeah, there's that's our theme around cozy movies to watch around the holidays, but there's a couple other things these movies have in common. Both are strongly focused on the plight of the Italian American.
Feature and family.
Both in family. Both feature prominent pinky rings.
Mm-hmm.
We've also got a significant age gap relationship in both, but in opposite directions.
I will say that is one thing that always is like, has me shaking my head, is like, in what world is Joe Pesci dating Marissa Tomei?
In what world is like 49-year-old Joe Pesci pulling 28-year-old Marissa Tomei?
Yeah, exactly.
That's like their real ages, which I think he's played as younger in the movie. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's charming.
Yeah, he's just so charming.
And he's got style. Those sneakers he's wearing, honestly.
And that big gold necklace.
Yeah.
Can't beat it.
All right, we're getting... Anyways. So yeah, Moonstruck is... Okay, so if My Cousin Vinny is about how arguing makes Italians horny, then this is about how the big moon makes Italians horny.
Bella Luna.
Which fittingly we open, of course, with Moon Hits Your Eye Like a Big Pizza Pie to open the movie. Apparently the director or someone wanted to open with what's the opera they see, La Boheme?
Oh yeah, La Boheme, yeah.
Whichever one they see, he wanted to open with that, and they were like, in test screenings, they were like, people think it's an art movie, we can't open with that. And so they're like, big, that's amore, of course.
Let's dumb it down. Let's dumb it down for these idiots.
But yeah, so, and again, this movie, speaking of the holiday theme, strangely, this movie opens framed as you get establishing shots in New York and like Christmas activities going on, which sets it obviously like in a time and place, but there's never really any Christmas theming other than just like some background decorations. But I do think it helps kind of like place you in. You're like, it's in New York. It's the winter. It's cold out. Everyone's wearing like big coats except for when they're slinging dough down in the basement and they're sweating in their tank top. But so our protagonist is Loretta Castorini, played by Cher, and she we open with her at dinner with her boyfriend Johnny Camerari, who is who's
biggest
a real dope.
putz. Yeah,
Such a putz. And I don't.
Oh God, he's awful.
It kind of threw me off because I'm not really familiar with Danny Aiello as an actor. I know he's been in a bunch of stuff, but I don't think I've really seen other stuff that he's in. And I think he's just styled like he's wearing a suit. He kind of gives off more like mobster vibes. So the fact that he's ultimately just like a big mama's boy baby, like who can't do anything for himself. Kind of like it took me a little bit to like adjust my like lens to view him as that, but it's pretty clear from the beginning that he's just like a putt. He's just like we get established from like the waiter in the restaurant and are talking that he's planning to propose to Loretta,
and who's played by Cher.
Yes, and he is he's extremely nervous. He's like scratching at his scalp, and then just like there's a plan involved, and he just like blurts it out to her, and she's like, what are you talking about? Like, you're not,
where's the ring? You're not on one knee.
Get on down on your knees. He takes off his pinky ring and he's like, oh, I didn't think of a ring. Which also like they're clearly older. I think she's meant to be like 37. I think later he's in his 40s, because I think Ronnie's like, you're 41 and your mom, like everything she does. So it's what, anyways, he gives her the pinky ring. He gets down on his knees, and Cher says yes, seemingly somewhat reluctantly, but and so I think she introduces here though that she's concerned about bad luck because she's been married before. And
he was hit by a bus.
Her husband was hit by. They've been married for 2 years, and he was hit by a bus, which is a really like. There's like this tragic underpinning to this movie. Like her character kind of has this like kind of sadness to her, and like it's clear that she even says she doesn't love Johnny, but she's kind of like he's nice, and like it's the kind of the right thing to do is I should get married to him.
And I will say, I just want to say right off the top, where I think My Cousin Vinny feels very well written and tight with the jokes and the dialogue and all that kind of thing. Moonstruck knocks character out of the park. I just like, wow, every single character, even like Gogo or Gobo or whatever his name is, the waiter, like he feels like a real person, but it doesn't mean that they're like really, oh my God, what amazing charismatic people. It's like every single one of them is super weird in their own way.
There's just like life behind their eyes, and they feel like they've lived as a person. Because I agree, there's this weird I wouldn't call this screenplay tight. there's just an energy from the start of the movie. I think we both picked up on it, where we were like, what is happening? Like it is this weird combination of these characters that feel really real and believable, but at the same time they're having conversations that feel insane when you're watching them. It strikes this really weird balance where you're both like charmed by them, but also kind of like baffled by them throughout.
I was smiling through the whole movie, being like, what the fuck is this? It's so good, but so weird. Like when she comes home for the first night, she's like, Dad, like our pa, I got something to tell you. And he's like, I don't sleep anymore, because if I sleep, I feel like I'm going to die. And like, I don't want to sleep because it's a waste of life or whatever. And it has this whole like weird thing around why he can't sleep anymore. They start pouring champagne. They drop sugar cubes into the champagne, which I don't know if that's like a traditional thing or if that's just these weirdo people. Or
according to IMDb trivia, it has something to do with Italians associating champagne with the devil, and by dropping in the champagne, you're like disrupting the devil from getting into you or something. So I don't
Gotcha.
know. Who, if
Yeah.
IMDb trivia is true, who can say?
Yeah, like it is weird that all of these people are super superstitious. Like all of them have very weird ways of making decisions. Like you were talking about Cher's character feeling like luck is the driving force behind things that happen in her life, and she wants to do things the right way so that she doesn't get bad luck. The Cosmo, the dad's brother, is like the moon like makes like everyone romantic, and like it drives love. And Johnny is like, my hand, like my life died with my hand, and all that kind of stuff. And Johnny, the no, Ronnie, or it's Johnny, I think, the putz is like things that you find out towards the end, and we'll get there, but like that something that happened is telling him to do something or not to do something, and it's just like all of these really superstitious people slammed together, and it's like now talk and like hash out which of these superstitions you're actually going to follow through on.
Yeah, and I think part of the like weird, almost like surreal quality, I think too, is having Cher and Nick Cage as your leading roles in this movie, because they're very much they're both incredible in this movie, but they're also so distinct as like, I mean, at this point they're both distinct as like cultural icons, but just as like performers, like no one else is delivering a performance like either of them. And so it's this strange thing where you have the protagonists who are, the relatable characters are these almost like just like larger than life cultural.
I'm just going to say it. Nick Cage is his performance, especially at the beginning. I think he kind of settles in a little bit later in the movie, but the beginning of this performance was the only thing that really made me go like, what is happening? Who is this person? Why is this in this movie? It's so fucking weird. Like, Nick Cage's performance is wild at the top. It's crazy. And we found out later that he was a second casting, because they had someone else in mind that was more age appropriate. Because again, like Ronnie is supposed to be like Cher's age or something like that, but he's played by like the 24-year-old Nick Cage, which is very strange.
Right, because then his brother's like 25 years older than him. So somewhere I read someone they initially wanted was Peter Gallagher, who
okay.
Yeah, eyebrows. Which
what a weird casting especially for a romantic lead.
I think Cher specifically wanted Nick Cage and pushed for Nick Cage. So, but they to get to, I think we can find our way to Nick Cage in the plot. Yeah. They get engaged. Johnny Camilleri insists he has to go back to Sicily because his mom is sick. She's on her deathbed. He needs to go back and be with her. Then he'll come back and they can get married. But he instructs Cher. He gives her a phone number. He says, I need you to call this number. This is my brother, Ronnie. I haven't spoken to him in 5 years, but I need him to come to the wedding. Yes. And so I think before that, Cher comes home. We get introduced to her family. She lives in this like palatial estate somewhere in New York with her parents and her grandfather, who's her paternal grandfather, her dad's dad.
Yeah, because I think when with the parent subplot, it's revealed that it's Cosmo's dad, not the other one, not the mom's.
I feel like each of these are just incredible. Cosmo is a plumber and a philanderer who's apparently made himself rich by just charging people insane prices for copper pipes. Yeah. Which an incredible scene where you get him interacting with the customer.
Yeah. It's so good. He's like, pipes. So your pipes, garbage. You just can't have them. But you could also have iron pipes. Now, iron pipes, they work perfectly unless something goes wrong. And something always goes wrong. Now, copper pipes. And he just like has this whole thing. And then it like cuts from him doing this to the client to cutting to him doing this to his mistress. And the mistress is like, oh my God, you're so smart.
And you kind of get a later with the college professor. He's like, "This is your house? What does your husband do?" And she's like, "He's a plumber." And you're like, so I think he's just scamming people for $10,800 to fix their shower pipes. But it's so, again, shout out to past guest Jamie. When she found out we watched Moonstruck, she's like, "There's one scene in that movie that I love, a monologue." And I'm thinking like, one of the monologues about love, maybe Nick Cage's speech about being a monument to justice. And she's like, the copper pipe scene. She's like, if I ever audition for a role, I'm using that scene.
I mean, it's great. It's a great monologue. And I will say monologues in this movie are excellent because the screenwriter is a playwright as well. And this does feel like a play in a way.
Yes. And that, I think it kind of, makes more sense as that. And I wanted to, usually like Wikipedia has like a production section for the movie. I couldn't really find a lot of background because I'm like, I wonder, it's what John Patrick Shanley, I'm like, what motivated him to write this movie? Because this is an early screenplay for him. And
I think this was his first screenplay, and then he did Doubt afterwards.
Right, which is insane. And I don't want to make presumptions. But John Patrick Shanley doesn't sound like an Italian, because I was like, this is clearly a love letter to someone's family. These are specific people in their life that they're basing this on, at least, inspired by. But I'm like, I don't know if that's the case. Maybe he was raised in an Italian family, but I don't know. It's just like it's kind of a mystery to me.
Yeah.
But
very strange. But keep going. So we have to get to Nick Cage because we can't not talk about Nick Cage.
Okay. I'll introduce. So you have Cosmo the dad. You have Rose the mom, played by Olympia Dukakis, who's also incredible. Just like weary with her husband, but kind of just like seems like kind of a little bit lost in life. Kind of has a lovely sequence later, but is also like this kind of like sage to Cher's character. I think you get the great line of her telling them she's engaged, or no. This is at the end when she's talking about Ronnie. She says, "Are you in love with him?" And Cher says she is. What does she say? She's like, "Oh, that's a shame."
That's what a shame or something, because she was saying at the very beginning, kind of foreshadowing a lot of stuff, when Cher says, like, she's like, "Are you in love with him?" Talking about Johnny. And she's like, "No, I'm not in love with him." And she's like, "Excellent. If you're in love with him, they can drive you crazy."
Yes.
They know that they can push your limits, which Cosmo is doing, because she very obviously loves Cosmo, still really wants like his love, and feels like this distance from him as he kind of goes through his like midlife crisis, essentially.
Yeah. But then, so then also in the house you have the grandfather, which I think is your favorite character. So I'll let you paint the picture.
I don't think there's a lot of a picture to paint. It is this, and we did the math on this. So if she's 37, and there's a line where the mom, Olympia Dukakis' character, says, "I didn't have you till after I was 37." So at least she's like 75-ish, the mom, who looks like 50 or something. The dad, if he was young when he had Cosmo, which would be like, 20s, maybe a little earlier, he's like in his 90s.
Yeah.
And he has this pack of 5 dogs that he just like walks around New York talking to other Italian old men. And he says like probably like 2 sentences of English the entire movie. The rest of the time he is just kind of babbling in like Italian, which is amazing. It's so strange, and I love it so much.
And again, he goes at some point. He just goes to the cemetery and just meets with all his friends, who presumably at the grave of another friend or one of their, like, it's not really explained, but someone who just has a rich backstory that's never really given to us.
Yeah, and I think it's like I think there's like a lot there. Like, I think that he is like, his wife is gone, and he still lives in this big house that he has in Brooklyn or Manhattan or the Upper East Side or wherever they are. And so he lives there, but like you said, he does have this community of other old Italian men. It does feel very like, very very much like a social group, but also like a group of similarly identified people that all have stuck together for a long period of time. And I think it's like the way that I was justifying it in my head was the reason why they're all there and just kind of chatting at this funeral is because I think once you reach a certain age, the like funerals are probably where you see most of your friends. You know what I mean? Like it happens with more frequency as you get older, and all of the people in your social group come together, even if they're kind of far flung, to be in them. And so it's like it's a way to kind of like reconnect with everyone. So it kind of has this weird sort of thing going on throughout the whole movie.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I didn't really think about it that way. But yeah, he's just, yeah, he feels, again, all these characters feel lived in and have a history that's kind of like communicated a lot of times not through very much like expositional dialogue, but just like a couple interactions here and there.
Yeah.
But
this one thing about this movie that is so strange to me is that if you took out all of the dialogue and just had their general like physical being in there, I think you would get basically the same story. The dialogue, they're always lying. It's not that they're lying, but they're just like very cagey about how they're feeling. And they'll be like, they have these weird ways of processing. It's like overly logical or superstitious or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And they very infrequently just say how they feel. And it's one of the reasons why I think both of us were like, what is this? Because a lot of the dialogue makes no goddamn sense of why it's said where. Like, so like you said, they go to, they're getting married. The putz is like, you need to reconnect with my brother. She goes to the bakery where his brother works to like meet him to get him to come to the wedding. In comes crazy Nick Cage. They're making bread in the basement of this thing. He's shoveling coal. He's like in a white tank top. He's sweaty. He's greasy. And he just starts like yelling at her about how he has a wooden hand, which is like this black glove that he wears the entire movie. And how his hand got like pulled into like a bread mixer or something and just like ground up when on his like wedding day or something like that.
Yeah, it's like unclear. He blames his brother for it. There's no logical explanation of it's just like his brother came in and asked for a loaf of bread and he accidentally stuck his hand in the slicer. And he's like, I blame my brother for it. But he's also like doing just this insane performance where he's like he's acting like he's on stage. He's stage acting, but it's in a movie because I feel like he's really playing for the back row of like basically like doing which is the one with the skull. Yeah,
it's like that level of acting.
But he's also like got his hand up like but yeah, I just love that. I lost my hand. I lost my bride. He has his hand. He has his bride. And then he starts yelling, "Get me the big knife!"
Yeah, because he's like gonna kill himself. He's like, "I'm gonna slit my throat, spray my blood all over the wall," and the person's like, "I'm not gonna do that."
And then the clerk from the bakery, who this is the only scene we see her in, is like in the corner crying because she's like, "I love him so much. He's so tortured."
Yeah, it's so tortured. I love him. And like one of the other people are like, "Have you ever told him?" And she's like, "No, I don't know how he would respond."
But anyways, so I feel like you kind of get this. He's just this like unbridled, but also repressed, like pure emotion.
Yeah, which is it's it's wild. Like the acting choices make very little sense, like in the world that they live in. Even at points, it even feels like Cher is like, whoa, okay. But it also, like, the writing of the script doesn't really match up with the performance because he'll be like yelling, like, "I'm gonna slit my throat, my hand, my life, everything's ruined." And then Cher's like, "Why don't we go have a whiskey in your house?" And he's like, "Okay."
Right.
It's so weird.
She's like, "I'm committed to convince this man to make up with my fiance and come to the wedding." Yeah, and they go back to his apartment, which is again a beautiful apartment, just I think above the bakery. And they fall in love, I guess.
Yeah,
it's like
she cooks him a meal. Yeah,
right.
she like cooks him
a rare steak and insists that he wants it well done. And she's like, "You're gonna eat it bloody." And he's like, "Fine." And then they get into a shouting match. He flips over a table, and then they start making out.
Yeah, they start making out, and then they go to bed and like consummate their relationship, I guess. But so fucking, it's like out of nowhere. They're like, at no point do they ever express any sort of like interest or sort of like sexual. I mean, the sexual tension, I guess, is there, but they are just shouting at each other the entire time.
Yeah. It's wild. It's an insane love story, but that's when the moon, when the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie. You're just, I think that's, so then we kind of get, she stays over with him.
Yeah.
And I think shortly after we get the aunt and uncle character, who are also just lovely.
Yeah.
Come over and talks about kind of the moon, the theme of the moon, where the uncle, who's Rose's brother, talks about how there's this big bright moon in the sky when Cosmo fell in love with Rose, and how, he thinks that is, how can you not fall in love?
Yeah.
When the moon is so big and beautiful. And so then you kind of get, is that when you kind of get the montage of the different lovers experiencing the moon and kind of...
And the grandpa, who's just like, Bella Luna, mi amore.
And he gets the dogs to howl at it. And it's, everyone's overcome, there's an energy about having this massive moon, which is also like, you get these like incredible, I assume, like matte paintings where the moon is like humongous, and that's just like, that's the there's something in the air, and the timing and the energy between them, coalesces, and they fall in love. The aunt and uncle kind of rekindle their relationship, which is very fun. Couple scenes.
Yeah, she's like, with that moon on your face, you look 27. And he's like, oh.
Yeah. It's so adorable. I love them.
Yeah.
But they then Loretta wakes up the next morning. She feels terrible and guilty, and Ronnie's like, look, I'll leave you alone if you just come to have you ever been to the Met? Just come to the opera with me. I love the opera. Which is it's kind of fitting for his character of this, just like, I think he just has this like, he just has this, I don't know, inner turmoil and like emotional, he just needs this like emotional catharsis, and like can't express that. And so it's like, this is just like, pure, the opera is just like pure expression of anguish and emotion that like helps me get that out.
And he hasn't been to the opera since his wife left him, or whatever, his fiance. He was like, I haven't been there in years.
And so you get, one, Cher goes to confess, which is a very funny scene, where she confesses her sins and lists like two really mundane things. And I was like, I also slept with my fiance's brother.
And he's like, wait. The priest is like, wait, go back. What was the last one?
That was like pitched. This is just such a strange movie, because in contrast to my Cousin Vinny clearly has like jokes. It's very pitched as a comedy. And I think this movie just threw me off at the beginning, because everyone's playing it, especially Nick Cage. They are playing it so seriously that you're like, stuff doesn't read as jokes as much. Like the confession scene clearly reads as a joke, but some of the other stuff you're like, it's just like melodrama, like
it
so
definitely, it feels very like, honestly, it feels very operatic. You know what I mean? Like, it's like such high emotion the whole time, and it's like very. I think you're completely right when you say it's melodrama, and like, it's just, even when, so I don't know if we ever said, but the fiance goes to visit his mom who's dying in Italy, and that's why he's not around while all this is happening. And there's like a couple of phone calls where you see him in Italy, and there's like, it goes from these like brightly lit kind of like New York scenes to like this deathbed where it's this old woman and all these old people like praying over her, and he's just like, yeah, my mother, she's dying, and like, it's so melodramatic, and like there's like, like Ave Maria playing in the background.
It feels it's so like funny. It switches to like The Godfather too, because it's framed too of him on the phone in the foreground, and it's just this like, it feels like she's in like a church of just
Yes.
like the mom on the deathbed back there. Yeah, those scenes are very funny. But yeah, then I think so. They go to the opera, and you kind of get intersecting stories right here, where they're Cher and Nick Cage are at the opera. We see, the audience sees that Cosmo and his mistress are also at the opera, and
her
then
dad, yeah.
Rose, the mom, goes to a dinner by herself at the restaurant where Cher got engaged, and ends up having this interaction with the horny college professor who we actually saw at the beginning of the movie, where he's taking these young women who are his students on dates, and inevitably, you know, is not the best date, and they get up and splash water on him and storm away.
Yeah. I will say this is something that I thought was really poetically done. It definitely like very theater, like very play writing sort of way of doing this, where the screenwriter matches or maps Cosmo's reasoning onto this other guy, because Rose and him have a conversation about like why men do this. And it's a great monologue too, where the professor is essentially saying how he has lost fulfillment and excitement about his own life because he's been living it for so long, and all of it feels very humdrum to him and rote. But when he sees himself in the eyes of these women who think that he is bright and inspiring, he can kind of reimagine himself as that person he used to be. And because you're sort of like, why is Cosmo doing this, and Cosmo does have like a line later on where he's just like, basically says like, my life is built on nothing. And she's like, shut the fuck up. Of course your life is built on a lot of things. And it's exactly that of you've been in something for so long. And especially like in this movie, it posits that men suffer from this more than women, but it's like the men are looking for something to reignite their passion for life. Not so much that he wants to like cheat on his wife. It's more just like he feels lost in his life.
Right. No, yeah, I think I like, yeah, the idea of like framing this conversation onto this other character, because yeah, clearly Cosmo would not be able to articulate that as a character, and it would feel very out of place if he were to suddenly be extremely lucid about his motivations. And yeah, that does make sense. It's a little tough because you're like, well, you're justifying why you're like being a predator to like 20-year-old women, but also, yeah, it works. I think, yeah, for kind of to like, yeah, to kind of explain an elegant way to explain some of the themes of the movie. And I think you also kind of get all the male characters in this movies none of them are really like malicious. They're all kind of like dopes in their own way a little bit.
Yeah, they're all just kind of sad,
Yeah. Like they're all just like a little, yeah, they're not totally capable of like handling themselves.
Yeah,
maybe except
like
the
being
grandpa.
adults essentially.
Yeah,
except for the grandfather.
Yeah, but so you kind of get this, she has this kind of enlightening conversation for her with this college professor, and he walks her home. It feels a little romantic. Mm-hmm. I think he's looking for something more. She sees grandpa, and he kind of,
they pretend to like kind of not see each other, but definitely clocks.
Like,
yeah.
And then I think she gives him a kiss on the cheek, right? And says, you're not coming into my house.
Even though he's like, hey, and he says like multiple times, like, I'm ready to go into your house. Yeah, like, I really like you. And I think that this is also the difference between the men and the women in this movie, is that the men sort of do these things even though they're self-destructive, but she stops and is like, no, man, like and throughout her interaction with him, she's like, yeah, the reason why they always go, like, all your dates go bad is because they're so freaking young. Like, what are you doing, you idiot? And like really calls him out on his bullshit. And like, I feel like I really liked that at the end. There's this moment where it's like, you could do the same thing Cosmo is doing, but then she's like, no, the whole thing is that I think the way he's doing is stupid. And like, I love him, so I'm not going to do that. Which I think was great.
Yeah, but you get at the same time that Loretta and Ronnie are at the opera, she sees her dad and kind of has a confrontation with him, and he's kind of like, let's keep this between us, please.
Yeah, well, I mean, they have dirt on each other, right? Like,
Yeah.
she is cheating on her fiance with her fiance's brother, which he sees, and then she sees that he's cheating on her mom with this other person, and they have this like sort of stalemate where they're like, let's just pretend like this didn't happen, and then they kind of go their separate ways.
And Cosmo also hates Johnny, so it's
Yes.
like you're like he you know, it's not like he's got any stake in that. I think we also maybe we brushed over it before the opera. You get the incredible makeover montage of Cher,
Yes.
which is also kind of funny because you're like, it's already Cher.
Yeah, she's already gorgeous, and she has like
And
a
then-
couple of gray hairs that they've
Yeah.
put in her hair and stuff like that.
She gets like a fresh perm, and then you're like, hell yeah, that's who. You
and
get,
then
like,
all the guys are like,
iconic-
"Oh my god, look at that number!"
Oh, baba boom.
Yeah,
But so then
Ka-chow.
afterwards they sleep together again after the opera. They kind of have this, they're both clearly very moved by the opera.
hmm
And they sleep together again, right? And then I think Johnny comes home early from Sicily and tries to go to the house, and Loretta's not there.
Man, what again, character is it's like a show don't tell thing with these characters. And man, the screenwriter is like, this guy's the biggest idiot in the entire world.
He just keeps forgetting his luggage everywhere.
Yeah, and he's like, wait, and he keeps stopping the taxi. And it also is like, even down to little things, like the taxi's like, yeah, that'll be $20, and he's like, $20, and he's like, yeah, $20, and he's like, oh, okay.
But so yeah, he comes by. They're like, Loretta's not home. I don't know where she is. He's like, all right, I'll be back in the morning to come see her. And so she comes home. She has a hickey on her neck. What do they call it? A love bite?
A love bite, yeah.
Her mom's like, you got a love bite. You got to cover that up. Johnny's home. He's coming over. And she's like, Johnny's home. And so then I feel like then you have this dramatic expectation. It's all, building to this big final scene in the kitchen dining room where, everyone from the movie kind of returns, and you kind of have these like, various confrontations. So it ends up, you hear a doorbell, you think it's Johnny, it's actually Ronnie. He's coming over because he says, I want to tell my brother.
Yeah,
And
I'm going to tell my
then
brother.
Yeah, you hear the doorbell again, you think it's him, it's actually the aunt and uncle are coming. Because
Which an amazing small plot line that doesn't matter to the greater plot at all, but is good for this one joke.
you explain it.
Yeah, so like earlier on, she's like working with she's a bookkeeper, an accountant or something, and her aunt and uncle are like, oh yeah, here's all of the deposit for like the last week's worth of sales from their business. And she's like, yeah, I'll hit the bank. She doesn't hit the bank, and they come in and they're like, is there something you want to tell us? And she's like, what? And then she's like, oh shit, the money. Oh, I'm so sorry. And they're like, oh, okay. Like, see, I would never have accused you of anything.
It was very funny. Yeah, because they were clearly like had the conversation of like, is she skimming off the books?
Yeah, did she like steal from us? And then she just
like,
forgot
we
to
knew.
deposit the money.
But but before Johnny even gets there, Rose confronts Cosmo and is like, I don't want you seeing her anymore. And he gets mad. He slams his hand on the table. He stands up and then he goes, okay.
Yeah.
Right? Doesn't he basically is just like, all right. And sits back
like,
down.
all right. And sits
I
down.
think that's when she yells at him, right? When he's like, I don't have anything.
Yeah.
Is that when
he's
she
like,
does? Or is that, yeah.
Yeah, he's like, sometimes you wake up and you realize your life is built on nothing. And she's like, fuck you. It's
Yeah,
built on
you're
like your
full of
entire
shit.
life on love,
Yeah, which I do feel like is kind of like this kind of just like these men are dopes. They're full of this like undeserved like ennui for like, oh, my life is nothing. And you're like, just fucking take a minute to appreciate what you have. Go to confess. She tells him he has to go to confession.
And he's like,
But,
yeah, okay.
Yeah. You Johnny finally shows up, and you're expecting this big confrontation where Ronnie or Loretta, and then Johnny's like, I told my mother that we were getting married, which I think she didn't want him to tell her before because she was going to die. And he was like, and then she had a miraculous recovery, so we can't get married.
Yeah, basically the idea behind it is that his mom doesn't like Loretta so much that while she's alive, he can't marry her, and so she fully recovers from the brink of death so that he doesn't
wills
marry
herself
her.
back to life. Yeah, and again, it ties into the superstition, the like curse, this all of this just like magical thinking that they're all like engaged in to kind of like justify like their actions and their feelings.
And also, there's a weird thing with the grandfather too, where before Johnny gets there, he also goes to Cosmo and is like, "Cosmo, I have to tell you something important." And you think like, "Oh my God, he's going to tell Cosmo that his wife was seen with this other man," and he's like, "You got to pay for the wedding. Like, don't be a putz, don't be an idiot. Like it's like on you to do it, and you'll regret it for the rest of your life." And he's like, "Okay, I will."
Yeah, which but yeah, so then Johnny calls it off. Ronnie says, "Can I borrow that ring?" and asks Loretta to marry him, and she says yes.
Accepts.
And they aren't they taking pictures at the end because
and like Johnny's like, what, and then the grandfather's like, "Come here." They all take a big group picture,
and they do they drink champagne with sugar cubes, and and that's it. That's
the movie. Yeah,
and these are both.
Hit me with how you feel.
Yeah, I think these are both like pretty totemic movies that people hold in very high regard. I think they both like did well when they came out and like won Oscars, but I think these are like, I consider these movies that are like still in the canon and like have withstood the test of time. But people are like, I watched these movies when I was young. I've seen them a million times. You know, I just love them. And I think there's a lot in common where they both have these like very iconic leading duos in both movies. That really like, and it's kind of similar like trajectory. I feel like establishing Marissa Tomei and establishing Nick Cage as these like young actors. But I think Moonstruck feels whereas My Cousin Vinny, I'm like, I would want to watch that again because I think there's just like there's a lot in there. It's a very cozy movie to watch, and I think like even some of the jokes might land more with some of the there's a lot of little setups and stuff. Moonstruck is a movie where I'm like, okay, I want to watch that again because I think by the time the movie ended, I think I had calibrated my perspective enough to be on the same level as this movie. I was like, okay, I think I understand what's going on somewhat or what to expect. And so I'm like, I think I'd be more on the same page. Whereas when we were watching it, I think, again, we were both like laughing and having a good time. But I think we're also kind of baffled by what we were seeing.
I would agree that it is definitely a baffling movie. That's such a great way to put it. I loved it. I love both of these movies so much. I think My Cousin Vinny is more of a well-crafted piece in that it makes sense from the get-go, and I think it's super universal. Like you could sit down with that with basically anybody, and I think it would land. Moonstruck, I'm not sure about that, but it's so fucking weird, and it has just like such a personality that I have to appreciate. It reminds me of something like Beetlejuice or Thelma or a lot of these other movies that are sort of like very, very specific. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that it's better or worse or anything, but it has a very specific identity in my brain. And I'm like, wow, what an interesting piece of art that this person created.
Yes. And it's because, it's kind of the thing where, it was probably pitched and funded and produced as like a kind of broad romantic comedy, which I feel like it kind of played as like as a huge hit, won a bunch of Oscars, but it is this, it's not the tone of what you would consider a typical romantic comedy, even like of the time. I feel like,
and it also like places the woman as the central person, which I think in a lot of romantic comedies, the man is like the pursuer, and it's like this kind of imbalanced relationship. I feel like in both of these movies, they very much value women as like these like very strong, like have very huge personalities, and they can stand toe to toe with any of the men in the movie as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think it's interesting to like consider it too as this like pretty specific thing because it's like you look at the screenwriter John Patrick Shanley and the director Norman Jewison, who's done a bunch of movies, but this doesn't like line up with like what the rest of their career are. Like John Patrick Shanley, like he made Doubt, and I don't know what else he wrote other stuff. I mean, Norman Jewison he made a ton of movies. He did like Fiddler on the Roof and Jesus Christ Superstar, which like maybe that's closer to on a similar plane as these movies. Like maybe this movie, because it's kind of like operatic, has stuff in common with like a musical. But he also like he did kind of more like socially conscious movies, and it's just interesting like comparing it to like Beetlejuice, where that's clearly like an auteur's statement, whereas this is this like kind of statement, but it's not like it was like consistent throughout the
but it's not it's not like it isn't really attached to a specific person. In fact, it feels like it's more attached to Cher than anybody else, or like Nick Cage or something. I would say both of these, like Moonstruck, I remember watching and being like, man, I wish I lived in like that New York of where like just like there's like these communities, the phones are like way less, technology isn't at a point where it's just like hell to be there, and you just see like everyone just feels like a real person that you would want to be around. Like when she walks into the wine and liquor store and the two owners are kind of bickering back and forth, but he's like, I dream about you still every night. And she's like, oh, you. And then he's like, oh. And it's like this whole thing where it's just like everyone is just kind of lovely in their own weird little way.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, it's very charming.
And whereas for me, going back to our theme of like cozy movies for the holidays kind of thing, I think My Cousin Vinny to me feels so Thanksgiving, and Moonstruck, I was like, I would watch that around Christmas anytime. You know what I mean? It is kind of set near Christmas kind of thing, but it's definitely not a holiday movie. It just feels like, oh, I would love to see this around Christmas.
Right. And you're like, yeah, if you're tired of the usual slop we're fed every year, if you're tired of your Elf, your Christmas Story, throw on Moonstruck. Yeah.
So we have to decide which one wins. I think so. To be open on Letterboxd, I think I put both of these in the 4s. I think Moonstruck was a 4, and My Cousin Vinny is either a 4 or 4.5. I know I saw on Letterboxd that you rated Moonstruck a 3.5. What did you rate My Cousin Vinny?
I gave it a 4, and I was leaning into 4.5, but I ended up going with 4. So I think if my vote is for My Cousin Vinny. I think I had a great time watching it, and even we were watching it with friends, and like people, you kind of crack jokes and like point to stuff. I'm like, this is just like, it wasn't even in this, we weren't. It's like good. It was just like a funny movie. It wasn't even like cracking jokes, like detached, ironic, like, oh, it was 90s movie. Like the jokes were landing, and I think
it's still so good. It's just such a good movie.
And I think in the theme of like movie to watch around a holiday, you want a movie that as soon as you put it on, you're just like you're in with it. Whereas I think maybe now Moonstruck, watching it again, I would be more on its page, but again, just it was that movie where it just had that sense of kind of bafflement, surreal nature from the start.
Yeah, I would have no problem putting My Cousin Vinny on in front of any member of my family and sitting down and feeling like everyone's going to like this. I think that it is super universal. It feels very broad. It's funny. It's not like, doesn't ask you any real big questions or anything. Moonstruck, I feel like, is for the weirdos. Like, I love it. I think it's great. But I think that in the category, and also just as a movie, it's a little bit of its own thing. It's not, I think, as tight. It doesn't feel as polished. And My Cousin Vinny, I just feel like is such a kind of singular movie that can be for anything to anyone, that I think that's the one I think I'm gonna hold up as a winner as well.
Nice. There we
There we
go.
go. We decided. My Cousin Vinny wins this movie versus movie. Any other things you want to talk about when it comes to these two movies? Anything that like really got you good or anything like that?
I don't think so. I can just check my notes real quick, but I think I hit them all. I had Moonstruck equals moon horny, Vinny equals argument horny. And pinky rings. So many canted angles in My Cousin Vinny. You know, like when the camera's just like turned at an angle. I feel like they really were leaning heavily on that, which was the only real strong like cinematographical choice in the movie, so it really like stood out. But
yeah, it goes down smooth. It doesn't have any filmmaking that you're like, what is going on? I think that it does like a Dutch angle a little bit, though a little less severe. I agree. I really like the framing of moon equals horny and arguing equals horny.
That was the connection
funny.
I drew. But I'm excited. I'd be excited to rewatch any of these movies, you know?
Yeah, I'm going to rewatch Moonstruck in December if you'd like to join me. Alice was like, I'm sad I didn't get to watch it with you guys for the first time. And I was like, I liked it enough that I want to watch it again. And I think December's the time to do it. So, all right. Well, thank you everyone for watching or listening, I should say, another Movie versus Movie. We will be back in 2 weeks with another Culture Boys where we decide what the next pairing will be. All right, goodbye.
Bye.
Movie versus